It's Tuesday, February 20th, 2024, and you're looking at a live view of Falcon 9 awaiting its 3:11 p.m. Eastern Time launch from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. My name is Soumi Srivastava, and I'm a responsible engineer for the Falcon Heat Shield here at SpaceX, and I'm joining you from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Welcome to our live launch coverage of the Merah Putih 2 mission for our customer, Telkomsat. Today's launch marks SpaceX's 16th mission of 2024 and its 311th to date. The Merah Putih 2 mission will strengthen connectivity over the Indonesian archipelago and will accelerate the deployment of digital infrastructure in Indonesia by providing satellite-based backhaul and enterprise services. We'll have more to share about today's mission later in the webcast. At T-minus 10 minutes and 15 seconds, let's learn a little bit more about the Falcon 9 that's supporting today's mission, which is flying for its 17th time today. On the pad today is Falcon 9, a two-stage rocket that's designed and manufactured by SpaceX for the reliable and safe transport of people and payloads into Earth orbit and beyond. It's the first orbital-class rocket capable of reflight. The entire vehicle stands around 229 feet tall, or about the height of a 21-story building. The bottom two-thirds of the vehicle is the first stage, which is also referred to as the booster. And the booster is responsible for accelerating the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere and into space using 9 M1D engines, and then separates from the rest of the rocket. The number 9 in the name refers to those 9 Merlin engines that power Falcon 9's first stage. The engines are named after the Merlin, which is a species of falcon. And the photo you're seeing now are these 9 Merlin engines that are just like the engines responsible for getting today's payload to orbit. Not only is the first stage the largest part of the rocket, but it's also the portion of the rocket that we attempt to land on one of our autonomous drone ships or back on land for future reuse. Today we're planning to land on the drone ship, just read the instructions. To date, we've landed Falcon 9 274 times. And reusability is super important as it allows us to refly the most expensive parts of the rocket, which in turn drives down the cost of access to space. Above the first stage is the second stage, which has a single Merlin vacuum or MVAC engine that ignites after the first stage separates. And that second stage is what will carry Merah Putih 2 into orbit. Speaking of the payload, Merah Putih 2 arrived in Florida in late January, and since then, the teams have been integrating the spacecraft to Falcon 9's second stage in preparation for launch. The payload is safely enclosed inside of the 17-foot diameter payload fairing, which is the large barrel structure with the pointed nose on top of the second stage. The fairing protects satellites on their way to orbit and are jettisoned approximately 3 minutes into flight, and the fairing is made of a carbon composite material. The fairing halves supporting today's mission are both flight-proven, with one half flying for its 10th time and the other half flying for its 11th time. And after separation from the second stage, both fairing halves will return to Earth and will be recovered by our recovery team. At T-minus 7 minutes and 44 seconds, Falcon 9 is tracking no issues and the payload is healthy. Falcon 9 has been loading propellants since T-minus 35 minutes and will finish loading at around T-minus 2 minutes. The range is ready to support and weather is green for our mission today. And if for some reason we don't launch today, we do have a backup opportunity tomorrow at 12:53 p.m. Eastern Time. For now, let's learn a little bit more about today's mission and the payload that's on board Falcon 9. was an awesome video from our customer Telkomsat. Next up, the transporter erector, or TE, will retract away from Falcon. That's the large truss structure you see there standing next to the rocket. First, we'll see the clamp arms open up around the second stage, and then the TE will begin to pull away from the rocket slowly. At T0, ground hydraulic systems will pull the TE even further away from Falcon 9 as it lifts off. The first stage is connected to a launch mount at the base of the TE, but the structure is hinged and will retract from the vehicle in preparation for launch. You may also hear it referred to as a strong back from the launch team when you're listening to the nets. We use the TE to roll the rocket out to the pad and raise it to its vertical launch position.
Strong back lower has started.
We should have a view of the clamp arms opening up in a couple seconds from now. There you can see them opening up. The TE also routes the vehicle's fluids, power, and telemetry umbilicals from the ground systems to the rocket and payload until Falcon 9 goes on internal power and clears the pad. The white clouds you see around the vehicle are the chilled gas above the LOX tank that we vent overboard to maintain pressure inside of the tank as needed. When that water comes out into contact with the humid, moist Florida air, it condenses into that cloud that you're seeing.
Close out.
At T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 will be in startup, and that means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken over the launch countdown. And then, just inside of T-minus 2 seconds, we'll light the M1D engines for liftoff. Merah Putih 2 continues to be healthy, and the Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. The weather is still looking green, and the range is ready to support our T0 of 3:11 p.m. Eastern Time. And with that, we are proceeding into the last few minutes of terminal count.
H2 LOX load, close out.
Good call out for second stage LOX load completion, and the white cloud that's venting is venting from the TE LOX line, and that is totally normal. In about 30 seconds,
Ground gas closeouts.
Be sure that F9 is in startup.
Falcon 9 is in startup. Go for launch.
We just heard from the launch director that all systems are go for launch of Falcon 9 with the Merah Putih 2 payload. Now let's sit back and watch.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 15. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff. Go Falcon, go Telkomsat. Vehicles pitching down range.
At T plus 30 seconds and counting, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, carrying the Merah Putih 2 payload. During ascent, we tilt the engines, also known as gimbaling, and that turns the rocket horizontally in what we call a gravity turn. In a gravity turn, the vehicle is still going up, but now we're also heading horizontally away from the launch pad. Moments ago, we throttled the engines down in preparation for max Q, or maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Max Q.
Just heard, we had max Q, and the rocket typically needs to go 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid being pulled back down to Earth and get into orbit. So keep an eye on the Stage 1 telemetry that's at the bottom of your screen. Now we have 3 events coming up in quick succession, starting with MECO, or main engine cutoff, stage separation, SES-1, or second engine start 1. And that's coming up in around 30 seconds from now.
Vehicles on the nominal trajectory. Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
And there you heard and even saw those 3 events that happened back to back, which were MECO, stage separation, and second engine start 1. Coming up next will be fairing separation. That's in about a minute from now.
Impact and pressures are nominal.
We have some really beautiful views from space. You can see the grid fins have deployed on the left-hand side of your screen on the first stage.
Fairing separation confirmed.
We just saw fairing separation, and we'll be attempting to retrieve these fairing halves again today once they fall back to Earth with our recovery vessel, Bob.
Both vehicles are on a nominal trajectory.
It's now T plus 4 minutes and 20 seconds into today's mission. Just past the T plus 6 minute mark, you should see on your screen the first stage entry burn. To start the entry burn, we'll relight 3 M1D engines, starting with the center engine, known as E9, followed shortly by the E1 and E5 engines. And it's similar to pumping the brakes to slow down the vehicle as it passes back into the Earth's atmosphere. We need to slow down to reduce re-entry forces, which then helps us recover and reuse the first stage. During the entry burn, Falcon 9 is decelerating by firing its Merlin engines, but we're still moving really fast, and this causes the vehicle to fly through Merlin's exhaust gases, which are also known as the plume, and this deposits a layer of soot on the vehicle surface. And that soot comes from the carbon-based fuel, the RP1, that Falcon 9 burns, and with each flight, the soot builds up a little bit more on the outside of the vehicle. Oftentimes, prior to launch, you can see that soot on the first stage as it's sitting on the pad. We have a really awesome view of stage 2, and you can see on your screen it's still picking up speed, and as it heads to its destined orbit.
Both stages are on a nominal trajectory.
Entry burn on the first stage is coming up in a couple seconds.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS is safed.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
So on the left-hand side of your screen, we have stage 1. You could see that it really decelerated as its speed slowed down. Reusability is key to lowering the cost of spaceflight, which enables more investments in critical scientific research. The Falcon 9 first stage that's supporting today's mission will perform this entry burn for its 17th time, having previously supported missions like CRS-22 and 25, NASA Crew 3 and Crew 4, and Turksat 5B.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance. Stage 1 transonic.
The Merlins on the first stage are optimized for sea level and achieve 190,000 pounds of thrust each during ascent and entry. After liftoff, Falcon 9's first stage has more thrust than 5 747 airplanes at full power. The MVAC engine, with a much wider nozzle, is optimized to 220,500 pounds of thrust in vacuum.
Stage 1 landing burn startup. And the next shutdown. Nominal park orbit insertion. Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
And there
Stage
you
1
have
landing
it.
confirmed.
That landing marks SpaceX's 275th recovery of an orbital class rocket, including first stage landings for Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. We still have one more burn of our second stage engine before we're ready to deploy Merah Putih 2 today. In a moment, we'll be going into coast, and we'll see you back here at the T+27 minute mark for the relight of our MVAC engine. But before we do, let's take a deeper dive on how Thales Alenia Space is growing the network.
Telkom is the biggest digital telecommunication company in Indonesia, which has complete digital business portfolios that are categorized into 3 digital business domains. Telkomsat is a Telkom Indonesia subsidiary which leads Telkom Satellite business line. We can now proudly present as the sun rises, signaling a new beginning to extend our reach to forge stronger connections. It's time to join us on a journey to discover new horizons with limitless connectivity. Just like the archipelago of Indonesia, where diversity spans across more than 17,000 islands. Serving as a strength. We've soared extensively, weaving stories and news into the fabric of every corner. From bustling cities to rural villages. As the largest satellite service provider in Indonesia, we consistently work towards offering communication services with internationally recognized satellite infrastructure, playing a key role in expediting the communication transformation in this digital era. With the best talents on board, we wholeheartedly ensure our communication technology services flow seamlessly. Providing end-to-end solutions. With decades of experience, we keep innovating to deliver the best services. Ensuring smooth and comfortable communication for all. We journey with speed, connecting far and wide indeed. In the satellite industry, our goal is to lead, extending beyond Indonesia's stead across Asia where our influence will spread. Together with Telkomsat, let's discover new horizons where there are no limits.
By the successful landing of Falcon9's first stage on the drone ship, just read the instructions. At around T+8 minutes, we had successful second engine cutoff, or SECO-1, and that was followed by confirmation of good orbital insertion. Coming up next, we'll be waiting for SES-2, confirmation of good orbit, and then we'll be entering about a 4-minute coast phase.
And back ignition.
So we just had confirmation of second stage burn of the MVAC engine on the second stage. And before we go to coast, let's learn a little bit more about today's mission. Telkomsat has chosen the Thales Alenia Space as the prime contractor of the satellite for on-ground delivery and making it in charge of early orbital positioning and in-orbit tests. Built on the Spacebus 4000 B2 platform, Merah Putih 2 will provide a capacity of more than 32 gigabits per second and a service life of 15 years. This is Telkomsat's first satellite with multi-spot high throughput technology, or HTS.
And back shutdown.
Merah Putih 2's HTS technology will provide broadband internet services with more capacity than conventional non-HTS satellites currently available in Indonesia.
Nominal deploy orbit insertion.
So we just had confirmation of second engine cutoff and nominal orbital insertion, which is great news. We'll be back in a few minutes for the deployment of Merah Putih 2. And now we're waiting for Merah Putih 2 to separate from Falcon9's second stage. If you're just joining us, quick recap, we had an on-time liftoff at 3:11 p.m. Eastern Time, and everything has proceeded nominally since then. Stage separation happened around 2.5 minutes into flight, and that was followed by a successful landing of Falcon9's first stage on the drone ship, just read the instructions, which marked the 17th landing for that booster.
Payload separation confirmed.
an awesome view and confirmation of payload deployment of the Merah Putih 2 satellite. And with that, we've got confirmation of a good deployment.